Hello and welcome back, everybody. So, quick update on where I've been for the last few weeks. I got sick. For about 2 weeks, I was just lying in bed doing nothing until Carol forced me to go to the medical center. And usually, my lungs are my strong point. I've got a good lung capacity. I can hold my breath a long time. So when the doctor was listening to my lungs with a stethoscope, he's like, it kind of sounds like they're fine, but we'll get you a chest x-ray just to be safe. Got my chest x-ray back, and I did have an infection in my lungs, mainly this lung. So I got prescribed some antibiotics, and it took probably a good 2 days to really start feeling better, even on the antibiotics. And then I guess we're at the end of a week now, so I'm just finishing off those antibiotics, and I'm at that weird point where it's like, you're getting healthy, but you're not quite there, and I'm kind of antsy to I want to maybe start working out again, but then if you get into that a little too quickly, you can prolong the sickness. But on the flip side, I've been lying around doing nothing for the last 3 weeks, and sometimes you can develop a habit of just continuing to do nothing because you have the excuse to be sick and do nothing. So I'm at that point where I'm feeling just better enough. I think I'm going to start my day with a high energy breakfast, including lots of vitamin C containing fruit and everything, and hopefully kick off the next step of this electric gold dredge project. So to start breakfast today, I haven't had a very big appetite for the last 3 weeks, so we're going to go with just 2 small eggs. These are from my next door neighbor's chicken coop, which is kind of a cool thing. I like that. Instead of going to the grocery store to get your eggs, the fact that there's just some chickens hanging out next door that produce these eggs every day. It's pretty cool. So I'm gonna crack a couple of these into a pan, slice up some fruit, get some breakfast, and see if I can get the energy to, get back to work in the dredge project. Bit of a delicious cheat code right here. Stuff's great. It's quite delicious. I haven't been getting a lot of calories in over the last little while here, so some fruit, some vitamin C for breakfast. Give me the energy I need. And it's very delicious. Doing these tests, I don't have enough amperage to run this off of this power supply here. This peaks at 10 amps, but what I am able to do is provide, say, like 24 volts, and then it uses less amps, and I'm running it through this DC to DC converter, which puts out a steady, according to this, 12.3 volts. So I did all of my testing at 12.3 volts for this, and now what I'm doing is I'm actually testing if I drop that 12.3 volts to 9.8 volts. This is about 80% throttle, and I want to see what does going from 100% throttle down to 80% RPM throttle voltage actually due to which size nozzle I need, as well as actual power consumption. So far, what's quite interesting is, if we just have a quick look at what we've got, for a 11 millimeter nozzle, I was at 145 watts at 12.3 volts would equal, I think it's around 3,000, I forget the RPM. Anyways, that RPM, if I cut the RPM by 20%, so I'm running 80% instead of 100% throttle, half the power use. So it really does add up if you're running a gasoline engine at 100% throttle versus 80% throttle. Use a lot less fuel, I imagine. But anyways, that's the experiment, and we're going to see if the nozzle size also changes with RPM. Be as quick as I can with the whiteboard here, but just what I've done so far. This is a 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump. This is a 3,700 gallon per hour bilge pump. This was about $60 on Amazon, and this was $90. So for an extra $30, turns out that with these stock impeller sizes matched to the appropriate jet for each one, this will use about twice the electricity and give you twice the suction of this. That being said, this is a 11 millimeter nozzle, and that is the ideal size for the 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump with my special 3D printed impeller. It would be a 12 millimeter nozzle if it was the stock impeller. And if I take that big 3,700 gallon per hour bilge pump and I connect it to this exact setup, I really don't get much bonus at all. It's just a little bit, because 11 millimeters is the correct size for the 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump. For the bigger bilge pump, I actually need to increase this to a 15 millimeter diameter based on the testing I just did. So how do you actually figure out what size of jet works best with your pump? How does the math work behind that? And this is just coming from the context of, there's somebody I've been speaking to who's they're designing a 10-inch dredge for Nome, Alaska. And they've got this big diesel pump kind of picked out, and they're like, well, what's the best jet size for this gold dredge? Typically, I've heard like a 1-inch jet for a 4-inch gold dredge, or a 3/4-inch jet for a 3-inch gold dredge. And I've learned that that's not actually the case. Your jet size should be based specifically on your pump. It has very little to do with the actual size of your suction hose. Of course, your pump needs to be related to the size of your suction hose. If you have a really long suction hose, you need a bigger pump, and it all kind of comes together. But here's how we do it. So first of all, an 11 millimeter nozzle, which is the one I tested with, has a surface area of 95 square millimeters, just the actual area within that circle. If you cut that in half into 2 smaller circles with the same area, so each circle would have half the area, from 95 to 47.5 square millimeters each, you would get, from a single 11 millimeter nozzle, you would need 2 7.78 millimeter nozzles. The hypothesis is, so long as the area is the same, the jet should work the same, and everything should, like, for the same power going in, you should get the same suction. Based on comparing a single 11 millimeter to twin 7.78 millimeter jets, the suction is the same. It's not actually any more efficient to have a twin jet than a single jet, so long as the area of your jets is the same. And I measured the volume of water traveling through this single hole versus these 2 holes, and the volume was the same. What's interesting is, by having 2 jets, the water columns mix together in a shorter distance. So if you have this jet right here, water's blasting here, the water's just going to squirt straight out the end. It's not going to mix with everything else in here and create suction. So you actually have to put an extra length of tubing here in order for that mixing to happen. Now, with a single jet, you need a longer length of tubing for that mixing to happen. If you have a whole bunch of small jets, it can happen more quickly. And the more powerful of a jet you're actually using, the more that would become important. So if you have a big gasoline engine, the single jet, you're going to need a really long length of hose to allow the full mix to occur. Whereas if you want to put that jet fairly close to your sluice box, it's definitely going to be a good idea to have a bunch of smaller jets. Still a little bit sick still. So there is an advantage to having multiple smaller jets, but it's not overall efficiency. It's just you can have a shorter distance between the sluice box and your actual jet. But to determine what size you would need, if you had that big engine out there, I would basically just weld up some kind of a cone and saw off the end so you have a small nozzle. Time how long it takes to fill some container of a known volume. So you have a 55 gallon drum or a feed trough. How long does it take to fill that with water? And then cut the nozzle back a little so you get a bigger hole, time it again, bigger hole, time it again. And then just gather all that data. And then here's the math you would need to figure out which size is actually the most efficient. I initially did this by combining the pressure I was getting. So what's the pressure reading times the flow? It doesn't actually work that way. I think it was grade 10, like basic physics, is 1/2 of mass times velocity squared is your kinetic energy. And that's what we need to know. We don't have to worry about Bernoulli's principle. Same thing with airplane wings. You can look at like the way the air travels over a wing, and there's a low pressure and a higher pressure. You can calculate out the lift of that wing using pressure, or you can calculate out the lift of that wing just using the equal and opposite reaction. How much weight of air is being pushed down per second is going to be the lift you're getting up. So you can use this. The same calculations will get you the same results. It's just different ways of looking at it. And I'm looking at this not based on pressures, but based on the kinetic energy contained in the water column. So, before I lose you here, if you have a cylinder with a 11 millimeter diameter, and the volume of that cylinder was exactly 1 liter for ease of math, how long or how tall would that cylinder need to be? And if you do the math, 11 millimeter diameter cylinder containing 1 liter of water would have to be 10.52 meters long. Now, if I know that I have a flow rate of 1 liter per second, then I know that this length would be coming out of a nozzle every single second, meaning the velocity of my 1 liter of water is traveling at 10.52 meters per second. So if we look at kinetic energy is 1/2 of mass times velocity squared. The mass of that 1 liter is 1 kilogram. The velocity of this water is 10.52 meters per second times 10.52 meters per second. So V squared is very important here. So I basically go 1/2 of 1 kilogram times 10.52 squared gives me about 55 joules of energy. And since it's 55 joules per second, that's 55 watts of energy. Now, my real world results through an 11 millimeter nozzle with my 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump was that I was getting 0.84 liters per second. Almost 1 liter per second, but just 0.84. Now, my calculation determines that that is just 33 joules of energy. But if I go from 0.84 up just 19% volume to 1 liter per second, I go up about 66% energy to 55 joules from 33 joules. And that's because it's velocity squared that really matters. So whatever pump you have, figure out the flow rate through a certain size of nozzle. You can calculate out the velocity based on the length of cylinder that, a certain volume would take, and basically use this kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. That'll get you the joules of energy that are actually coming out through your nozzle. Then by trying a variety of nozzle sizes, I would recommend like an Excel sheet so you can just enter your data and have everything sort of calculate for you. You don't have to do it. But that's how you figure out which nozzle size gives you the most joules of energy. And I did actually confirm, this was, what's all in my head, but I built the identical jet with 11 millimeters, 10 millimeters, and 12 millimeters. And the real world flow that I was getting through, like the actual suction I was getting, actually worked out that the 11 millimeters was the best suction based on the calculations. So that seems to be true. Going forwards from here, basically what I've determined through my measurements downstairs is that the new big bilge pump is going to need a 15 millimeter diameter nozzle. I didn't test like 15.3 or 15.4. I just went from 14, 15 to 16. But a 15 millimeter diameter nozzle will work best with the new bilge pump. So I have to design some sort of a Venturi like this that has a total surface area equivalent to a circle of 15 millimeters. That will work best with the new bilge pump, and it should use about twice the electricity and give me about twice the suction of a stock 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump. Of course, I increased the efficiency of my stock 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump with the 3D printed impellers I've made. I think there's something over 30% increase in energy output based on just a 3D printed impeller. So I will obviously have to work out the correct impeller for this new bilge pump at some point. But initially, it's a bigger, more powerful bilge pump, and without any modifications to it, I should see a significant increase in suction just based on using a bigger bilge pump, providing I enlarge the size of these holes. So I'm gonna 3D print a new one of these to match the new bilge pump, and then we can sort of see how our suction is and if we're on the right track. One last thing real quick. is if you had that gasoline powered engine and it was running at 100% and you'd selected the exact size jet that you want or the area of the jet that you want, what if you only run that at, say, 75% throttle? How does that affect the size of the jet? I was a little bit surprised about this. My hypothesis was if you throttle down, you would need a smaller jet because you've got less water to take advantage of. Turns out that based on the test I just did, running at 100% throttle, it was a 15 millimeter diameter nozzle I need with that pump, and using the same impeller and whatever that pump design is, if I throttled down to 80% of throttle, my power use dropped by almost 50%. Just that's that velocity squared thing again. If you lower your RPM a little bit, you lower your power output a lot. So that's something to consider. But even dropping things down so that my power output was about 50% of where it was, running 80% of throttle, same 15 millimeter diameter was the ideal nozzle size for that pump. So for example, if you happen to have a 4-inch dredge, typically you're supposed to go with that 1-inch jet, and a 3-inch dredge might only have a 3/4 inch jet. If you're using the same pump, say you have a 6.5 horsepower Honda pump running a Keen P180, whatever size jet works ideally with that pump, it would be the same jet size for your 4-inch and your 3-inch, because even if you're throttled down, so you're only using, half throttle or 3/4 throttle with that 3-inch dredge, the nozzle size that's most efficient happens to be the same based on my testing. Now you might still see a 3-inch dredge with a smaller nozzle size because you would typically use a different pump with that dredge. Like you might have a pump designed to go with a 4 horsepower motor, and so the pump would be different, and that's why you would see a different size jet. But for whatever pump you're using, it seems to be you figure out the area that works best with that pump, and that's what you go with regardless of the size of your dredge, according to what I've seen so far. So that's all I gotta say. Let's get 3D printing. So what we've got here is the next Venturi I'm going to print. It is a triple jet, so there's 3 jets, and it took quite a bit of effort to figure out the plumbing to sort of put everything together here. And the other thing I've done is it flares open at this end, so the velocity of water traveling through this thinner section, once you add additional water from these 3 jets, there's more water, so the velocity would increase. I've just coned it open so the velocity will stay consistent. There should be a slight increase in efficiency because this is now a 5-degree better angle, and because the slower velocity in here and this, the delta between those velocities should give me a slight bit of efficiency. But the reason I kind of wanted to just put this one little clip into this video is to show you kind of the process of, there's a period where you just sit at the computer and you try to make something, and then once it's ready, you press a button and this box over here turns it into something real. I'm about 90% sure this will actually print out. You got to make sure that you don't have overhangs and little things that won't print properly, but I think everything should work, and then I can get to testing this. And what I wanted to quickly touch on, and I know this is sort of a video about a gold dredge, but it's also a video about how I've been feeling sick for the last, over 3 weeks now. One of the things that happens when you're sick is you don't exercise, and then your body gets, it's harder to sleep at night if I haven't done some exercise throughout the day. But the same thing happens with your mind, is you have all these things you need to do, and you're just too tired to do them, or you have this lack of energy, and especially coming the tail end of a sickness, I should be better now, I'm feeling a little bit better, but the brain is still brain fog, and so you've got all these things you need to do during the day, and then you don't do them, so when it comes time to go to bed, your brain is just on overdrive because you're thinking about all the stuff that you haven't gotten done, which then affects your sleep, which probably doesn't help you, get less sick. So for a little while here, I didn't have the numbers I needed. I needed to know what size of jets to actually model, because once I've put all this time into modeling this thing, I want to make sure that I'm actually doing it with the right size jet and everything. So I managed to get the energy one day to actually figure out what I needed, and then, when I'm sick, I can sort of tinker around at this for a little bit, but after a couple hours, the brain just sort of shuts down and says, no, we're not doing it anymore. And I think what's kind of important here, that what I'm trying to get at is, in the comments, there's always going to be somebody who's like, wow, Kyle, I can't believe how smart you are and you figured all this stuff out. Or for some reason, what they're saying is that I could never do this. And to address that, yes, you can. Like, this is not rocket science. There's this whole idea that certain things are just beyond your reach, that you can never figure them out. Take the example of learning a new language. I mean, hey, it's all Greek to me. I could never learn another language. But if you actually want to do something, if you have the motivation to do something, you can learn another language. There's some TED Talk out there that says you can learn most things, like the very basics of something, in 20 hours. And hey, if you put half an hour in at a time or an hour in at a time, once that adds up to about 20 hours, you'll realize, wow, I know a lot more about that than I did before. And it's just have that little spark of belief that you can do something, and then maybe eventually you can actually get to the point where you can do it. For me, this is sort of that moment. I've got this thing, and you can sort of, look around. I got all the pipes lined up and everything. There's threads places. Like, to actually create this, for me, it still took a lot of time and effort to do this, but as I'm doing it and I hit a dead end and I don't know how to wrap this pipe around the edge properly, I watch a video on how to do it, I learn how to do it, and then you go in and do it, and eventually you can actually get there. And it's like, I'm literally the person who's like, no, I'm not a computer person. I don't do that. And this is another little wake-up call where, since you're not forced to learn something, like in university, you might have to learn how to use Excel, which a lot of people would say is very simple. Like, everyone knows how to use Excel, but Excel is this incredibly complicated, it's like a random graph that's like, how the heck do you use Excel? Or Photoshop, or a video editing program. All of these things are just these impossible things that, well, because I don't know that, I could never do whatever it is I want to do. No, you just accept that you're going to suck at first, accept that you're going to fail many, many times, chip away at something, believe in yourself just a little bit, and eventually you'll get there and you'll figure it out. And all you have to do is put in the time and, I don't know, try. So for whatever it is I'm blabbing about here, made a thing. Once this is done, it goes into this box and we'll see if it actually works or not. Print and send it. Takes it from here magically through the air to this wonderful box. Ooh, let's see how this turned out. So it should just sort of break off the base. Okay. First look, threads turned out fairly well. And oh yeah, I think that's all nice and tight. I don't know if this is going to focus, but we've got a triple jet. Yeah, I like that. Looking forward to seeing how this works with the big bilge pump compared to the old one. So it's the same size intake as before, and then I flared this open a little bit, and these 3 jets are equivalent to a 15 millimeter single nozzle, and these were the equivalent to an 11 millimeter single nozzle, because that went with this pump. And this is the stock bilge pump. A future project will be to play with impellers to see if I can improve this, but yeah, this has the secondary side effect of slowing down the water on the exit side, so I can go straight into a flare and a sluice box pretty quick right after this, assuming we get good enough suction for that to work. Quick test on the test stand here to confirm this is a 15 millimeter nozzle where I got my best results. That is split into 3 different nozzles, but I just want to see how close I am to the same flow and pressure that I got with this versus this, because here it kind of makes a sharp corner right there, and in testing I noticed that this jet gives a little bit more pressure than these 2 side jets, so I'll have to like redo this curve a little bit and make it a little bit more evenly angled right at the top there. But I'm pretty close to the same flow. I just get a slightly higher pressure, lower flow with this, indicating a little more resistance in the jetting. But I am going to see if I can actually fire this up and film. This is, I'm going to be providing probably about 24 volts. It goes to this converter here, so you can run any battery, like 18-volt tool battery, whatever, and then this will give you a constant 12 volts. This is my power meter, so I can get readings off of directly what that's using, and we'll sort of see how everything works. But I'm just going to show you what this looks like running, so we're going to fire this up. Actually pretty even. It's not too bad, but it could be improved a little bit. And just get everything coming out the other end here. Yeah, I'm just getting wet. It's not, I don't have a long enough tail right here to fully mix, but there's clearly suction even now. So I'm going to put the camera down so I can let go of this without getting sprayed, and we'll test the flow meter right here, but connected to here so you can see what amount of flow is actually going up the nozzle there. Whew. Yeah, good times. Oh, hello up there. So I'm inside at the bathtub. I need the bigger tub here when I get this whole thing assembled. I can test the impellers and stuff in that tub under the house, but to test this, I just come in to use the bathtub. I'm wearing a jacket inside because in Australia, we don't really believe in like insulating our houses or putting in any sort of central heating. So you basically just have a space heater in your bedroom or your office, and the bathroom right now is a little bit freezing cold. Basically, if it's 15 degrees Celsius outside, it's 15 degrees Celsius inside, and that's a little bit cold for me. So the jacket. Now, what we have going on here is this power supply is one of the things I can use, and this is just an 18-volt Milwaukee tool battery. I'm going to plug this into this 12-volt, it's a DC to DC converter, so you can get anything up to 24 volts going in, and it puts what appears to be 12.3 volts coming out to here. So this is exactly what I would be using if I was taking this thing out, you know, to clean out a culvert or something like that. So we'll fire that up, and I have my flow meter hooked up to the dredge here. This guy right here, make sure you can see that. That's the flow meter, and it will give me a reading here of how many sort of liters per minute I am sucking through the machine. And I'm then going to stick on this 1 meter long piece of tubing. This isn't like ideal dredge tube, it's a little bit too much of a slinky for that, but this should represent sort of the skin friction of adding more hose, and I can see how much suction loss I get by adding a meter of hose to this contraption. So this will give me my reading. Let's plug it in and see how she goes. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's sucking like a whirlpool. This is a Seaflow 3,700 gallon per hour pump. And this is the stock pump, stock impeller. I'm sure I can see some improvements if I 3D printed a better impeller for this thing. Also the triple jet Venturi. It's 3 jets, and the total surface area of all 3 jets is supposed to be the same as a 15 millimeter single jet. That was the best performance I got in previous testing, but that is a little bit off. There's a little bit of extra restriction. I could, you know, model it better in Fusion 360 to get some slight improvements there. But even now, without everything fully optimized, I'm gonna bring you down a little closer, but this thing actually has enough suction that you could dredge with this. Pretty solid. There you can see we're sitting roughly at about 160 to 163 watts. That's the amount of power we're gonna be using right now. Just going by feel, this is good enough suction to dredge with. It's not like if you were to tune the engine on your 2-inch dredge where you can't even, like if you got a rock stuck to this, you can't even peel the rock away. So it's actually kind of perfect right now. This will definitely get you the suction you need and get down into some cracks a little bit. Not bad. Here I'm expanding things open. I did this for some efficiency reasons. I'm probably thinking I explained that earlier in this video. But right here, let's see if I can get you a better angle here. That is a decent amount of water being moved. Because the tube gets bigger, it slows down a little bit. And that's not going crazy fast. So what I did is I looked at a video of my old high banker. Let me just shut this thing off here. There we go. So what it is, I looked at a video of my old high banker, and I tried to time how long it took the bubbles to go down so I could see what the velocity of the water was going over that Pop and Sun sluice matting. And my theory is that if I get the same velocity of water traveling over a sluice box, even if it is a subsurface sluice, I should see maybe similar capture results. The issue is, in a full-size sluice box, you've got a bit of an angle, the water's going fairly quickly as it's going downhill, and you can get a wide sluice. So in the case of my high banker, it's 10 inches wide, well, 2 levels of 10 inches wide, but 10 inches wide. Now, this is a lot more volume of water. The volume going through here is higher, but because this is tall, I can't make it 10 inches wide, or it would just be going way too slowly. So I did some like ballpark napkin math, and I determined that this, which is roughly 4 inches wide or about 100 millimeters, not sure, I can't remember exactly, but not super wide, but this should give me the velocity of water to make the sluice mats work in a similar fashion to what I saw in my high banker. That's sort of my theory right now. So I'm going to screw this on the end and just visually see what it looks like to see if I'm roughly ballpark. It'd be a very narrow sluice, so you probably couldn't process as many yards per hour kind of a situation, but it's a start point, and I just want to see how well this works. So it's slowing down enough that it's only filling the bottom half of this at the surface. But if we get right down to proper, fully submerged, the velocity isn't crazy high. Like, I don't actually think I would need to slow this water down, providing I had a semi-aggressive sluice matting in the sluice itself. And then there's no reason to lift this above the water if I can get away with full subsurface. But yeah, like this, it's got really good suction. So I don't have this hooked up. I've got to hook this up to this thing to get the numbers. That's what I'll do right now, is I'll figure out what the numbers are with this, and then we'll throw the extension on it and see how that affects things. All right, so to conclude this video, we have a functioning gold dredge. This is a 3,700 gallon per hour bilge pump, and with this Venturi, it sucks well enough that you could move gravel through this tube. That is for sure. With this tube, this is not the best tube as far as skin friction and resistance. You can see it's kind of like, it squishes like this, so it sort of accordions, and the edge gets all zigzaggy. I don't know if we can see that in here very easily, but it's just, there's a lot of water resistance because it's such a soft tube. I've had trouble finding like the nice Tiger Flex Keen Engineering dredge hose here in Australia, but that dropped our suction by 22% over just sucking up this little 3D printed smooth nozzle. So definitely significant, but still would work. I would want to have a little more efficiency here, or maybe with a better impeller in order to use this crappy hose. But with good dredge suction hose, a meter long, connected to this sucks gravel. It would actually function. Like, the plumbing of this dredge is complete. That I need to extend out into a bit of a sluice box. That some point in the future is something I have to do. And an interesting thing I played around with, this is just rough top conveyor belts. We're going to get in close here for you. The rough top conveyor belt has these little squares that stand up and kind of create vortexes and then go into these dips. And what I really like about it is each one of these troughs has like linear breaks in it. So if you were to tip this side to side, or in a actual sluice, there's turbulence, like stuff's moving all over, and you don't have these solid troughs side to side where material can get sloshed side to side. So I built a 200% scaled up version of this right here. And what's kind of neat is instead of those little squares on top to create vortexes, I don't know if you can see them, they kind of look like little arrows on top here. So the water flow would be going that way. But those are the vortex generators you might see on the back of a little like Subaru WRX. So that would create a vortex to suck stuff down into this hole here. And just playing around with the fact that a 3D printer could, in theory, 3D print your sluice mat. And for something like what we've got here, you basically need like a 10-inch long sluice, or like somewhere between 200 and 250 millimeters, which is conveniently the size of my 3D printer. That's all you really need to get like the low-hanging fruit. Like if you're going after that Alberta fine flour gold, it's a whole different animal. But normal fine-ish gold is actually really easy to capture in the top of most sluices. So maybe we can use a 3D printer to come up with something that extends off of here. I kind of like the idea I've got going with this flaring out like that, and the speed I'm getting off of this looks actually pretty good. That's 100 millimeters wide. So how we actually get a proper gold dredge out of this, I'm not entirely sure. Lots of different ways of doing that. I've been talking to a couple people. One guy in France, he just bought a 3D printer. Congratulations on that, by the way. And yeah, so he's doing some testing on this as well. And he's got a place where he can go and use something like this. And I've also been talking to somebody in Brazil, and same idea, they're testing different things out. And so all around the world, gold is going to be a little bit different. The recovery system, how deep of the water it is, like where do you want your bilge pump? Is this going to be a floating unit or something you just kind of hold on to and keep level? Like, I'm not really sure how to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution, and it's something I'm thinking about. But for now, I just wanted to get the plumbing to work. And the plumbing, if we have a look at this, this works even though that definitely has room for improvement. Just testing this on the nozzle test based on the pressure and flow I got out of this, I am not running at peak efficiency just based on how this actually turned out. It was my first attempt, and this took like a full day just to design that in Fusion 360 as I'm learning. But if I can improve this, then right there, that's the stock impeller. And when I did this with a 2,000 gallon per hour bilge pump, this is the 3700, I got, forget exactly what it was, but it was over 30% efficiency gain just by 3D printing a special impeller. So imagine if I did that with the impeller being improved, this being improved, like a nice 1 meter actual dredge hose. Like this thing is going to be pretty darn powerful for an electric 2-inch dredge. And considering at some point I was just wondering if this would even work, it definitely works, and there's still like low-hanging fruit for improvement. So I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to go from here. This is probably going to be a like I might go do something else in the next video and then come back to this project, and it's just going to be churning away in the background. But initially what I want to do is I want to experiment with the Venturi a little bit more. I want to see if I can get that triple jet lined up a little bit nicer, as well as I have an idea where it's like maybe like an 8-jet system, but just like a water jacket, so that I can, right now the bilge pump is pointing forwards, which might kind of get in your way. So you could just have a longer hose and have this bend back over here. But if I did like a water jacket around here, where instead of this pointing forwards, I could have this pointing like sideways, for example, or like at an angle backwards or something like that. That might be a little more convenient to get this out of your way. So yeah, not entirely sure what's next with this, but the plumbing works. An electric gold dredge is absolutely possible. And yeah, let me know in the comments, like basically, where do we take this? Where do we go from here? What is your specific situation? Like, I'm going to work on this, but I'm not sure what direction to take at this point. So until we get back to this, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll try to check in a little bit more often now. Like I think I said at the beginning of this video, I was sick, still a little bit sick, and so hopefully I can actually get a little bit more videos and get back to doing YouTube again now that I'm feeling better. So until then, cheers and thank you for watching, everybody. Let's leave you with these tiles that I flew to Australia. There's Banded Peak, Heart Mountain, and Mount Yamnuska, which I actually climbed King's Chimney, which is this little edge piece right over there with Chris in one of my old YouTube videos. So that's kind of cool. And that's kind of cool. And we'll see you in the next video.